everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Thank you all for the love and support you've shown me and the channel.
Oshi no Ko. I just wanted to be in a band, chapter 112 to 128. I just wanted to start a band, but I decided to become a rock star. 1221 words. The atmosphere in the practice room could be summarized in one sentence: they were walking on thin ice. After that night, Hyde's heart, which had been scorched black, was now frozen solid, like mountain ice in the dead of a bitter midwinter. Intoxicated by the alcohol in his drinks, and the nicotine in his cigarettes, Hyde spent his time in the practice room either writing songs at a breakneck pace or shredding his guitar with terrifying intensity. It was almost laughable how the hardships of life seemed to be heightening his prowess as a musician. Does it seem like the leader's songwriting ability has gone off the rails these past few days? If being a bald mess is the only way to get that kind of skill, I don't even want it. Shuji, the bald bassist and a relentless perfectionist when it came to music, watched Hyde with a complicated expression, feeling a mix of heavy-hearted concern and raw envy. In any case, even if Hyde the human was falling apart, Hyde the rock star had been completely resurrected. So you want to use Sakamoto Ryuichi for the Grammys too? Wouldn't a double guitar setup make the sound a lot richer? Does that mean you want to bring him in as a formal member? This isn't just a Hyde concert, it's the Grammy Awards. Makoto, that's exactly why. Listening to the exchange between Hyde and Miyazaki, Makoto, Shuji, and Yokishi shared a glance of concern. Hyde's current demands were signaling a fundamental shift in the direction of Enfants Terribles. Because every member possessed such immense talent, they had overlooked it until now, but the band's sound was actually quite minimalist. This was an inherent vulnerability for Enfants Terribles, as their numbers were small compared to other rising bands that typically had 4 to 6 members. The reason they had maintained a 3-man lineup despite this weakness was to preserve the band's internal culture, as much as possible a culture that allowed the members to remain humans, rather than just stars. Therefore, Hyde's recent demand could be interpreted as a declaration: he intended to focus more on his life as Star Hyde than as human Hyde. Men, I'm against it. Leader, I think it sounds good. Surprised by the unexpected disagreement, Shuji and Yokishi stared at each other in shock. The Grammy Awards announce most of the winners in advance. However, there are certain awards that must be presented live at the ceremony. These are the General Field Awards: Best New Artist, Song of the Year, Album of the Year, and Record of the Year. Aside from those, only the awards for genres that led the industry that year are presented during the main event. Unlike last year's ceremony, a rock category had been newly established this year, and Enfants Terribles had already been notified as the presenters and winners of this segment. Enfants Terribles' high-speed charge. This year's rock scene was dominated by Enfants Terribles. Of course, while the Best Rock Song and Best Rock Album winners hadn't been publicly revealed yet, the public already knew. Guessing the protagonist of those awards was far too easy. They were the ones producing overwhelming results across the global rock scene. Enfants Terribles, the band that had essentially introduced the genre of rock to this world for the first time, was still reigning as its undisputed ruler. Can Enfants Terribles conquer the general field for 2 consecutive years? Countless music experts predict Enfants Terribles will sweep every award except Best New Artist. Enfants Terribles challenges the legend. We are witnessing the moment a legend is born. While the band had casually brushed off the American Music Awards, their attitude toward the Grammys was noticeably different. This ceremony was the crucial turning point that could turn Enfants Terribles into giants, who would be remembered forever in the music industry. And on the day of the ceremony, countless music fans who had traveled from all over to witness the birth of a legend began to congregate at the Los Angeles Convention Center. The Los Angeles Convention Center. It was a place where Enfants Terribles had already performed during their first album tour. And today, the most prestigious music awards in the world were being held here. It's completely different from a year ago. It's becoming hard for this old man to keep up. Paul McCartney, one of the most respected music critics in the UK, smiled as he looked over the audience seats filled with Enfants Terribles fans. Even with my dulled senses, I can tell. This year the General Field Awards belong to those kids again. As a critic, Paul McCartney was predicting an 8-award sweep for Enfants Terribles. For reference, the record for most wins at a single Grammy Awards was 8, achieved by Michael Jackson in 1984. Those kids don't fall behind even when compared to Jackson during his prime. Enfants Terribles was satisfying the Grammys' picky standards, which looked at both commercial success and musical integrity. The reason he predicted 8 wins was that, frankly, no one was currently more suited to be a Grammy winner than them. When are they coming out? The Grammy Awards were already past the introductory stages. Paul McCartney knew they would be appearing soon. The presentation for the newly established rock genre category was about to begin. Michael Jackson, serving as the MC for the Grammys, held the cue card and flashed a wide grin. The next group is a group of juniors I'm very fond of. As Michael Jackson shrugged his shoulders with the same relaxed confidence he used to tease his concert audiences, the crowd responded with a deafening roar that sounded more like a collective scream. The winners of Best Rock Album, EF. The moment Michael Jackson called out their name, 3 men with muscular builds began to walk out from among the sea of celebrities. With Hyde the most handsome of the group leading the way, they stepped onto the stage amidst the cheers of their fellow artists. Unlike last year, when he had barely managed to drag his drunken members out to grab the mic, Hyde took the stage with the unwavering confidence of a rock star. Even to Paul McCartney, he looked different. Unlike last year, he was radiating a massive star aura. I want to say thanks to everyone who voted for us. As for the judges who didn't vote for us. If I hit you with this trophy, on a scale of 1 to 10, how fucking much do you think it'll hurt? After starting his acceptance speech with a simple greeting, Hyde ended it with a bold, high-tension statement, exuding the raw arrogance of a top-tier rock star who knew they were the best. Enfants Terribles barely had time to leave before they were called back to the stage. The winner for Best Rock Song is Enfants Terribles. They were winning back-to-back. With 2 awards already secured, the members of Enfants Terribles let out hearty laughs. Their demeanor was a complete contrast to last year, when they had delivered a drunken, rambling speech. I heard there were a few people lately saying we were an influence on them. Thanks, but fuck off, it was nothing. Ironically, the audience felt that Hyde looked even more like a rock star, now that he had discarded his human side. Chapter 113, Side Story, Strawberry Field Forever 1003 words, no thanks needed, damn it. It was nothing. After receiving several more awards, Enfants Terribles didn't return to the artist's seating area but vanished backstage instead. Whoa. That move meant only one thing: a performance by Enfants Terribles was imminent. The massive crowd gathered at the Los Angeles Convention Center felt their hearts hammering against their ribs in anticipation. Shortly after, the lights began to dim, ratcheting up the audience's excitement. While the stage was shrouded in darkness, and Enfants Terribles set up their gear, Michael Jackson took the mic to buy some time. The next performance is by the group that just swept the awards earlier. Please welcome Enfants Terribles. The darkness dissipated as the stage was unveiled. The audience burned with curiosity about their opening track. Would it be an acoustic live set like last year? Or would they bring out a full orchestra to showcase the grandiosity of their sound? Even Michael Jackson watched with narrowed eyes, wondering what kind of stage his juniors would deliver. Sure enough, a gem and a massive drum were visible on stage. Since Enfants Terribles had recently been drifting away from public-friendly tunes to test more experimental music, this much was within the realm of expectation. However, there were notable differences. There were 4 members on stage this time, and they had brought out a keyboard instrument that looked distinct from a standard piano, one many had never seen before. Is that a mellotron? The instrument Enfants Terribles had brought out was something you couldn't possibly recognize unless you possessed an obsession and passion for music on the level of Michael Jackson. The mellotron, a keyboard instrument that mimics the sounds of woodwinds or strings. It produced an alien, idiosyncratic sound that had caused it to be buried by the mainstream industry, eventually leading to the bankruptcy of the company that manufactured it. Yet, Enfant Terribles had brought it back into the spotlight. Our third album will feel something like this. The crowd went wild at Hyde's bombshell announcement regarding their third album. Hyde stood with a resolute expression beside Sakamoto Ryuichi, who was seated at the mellotron. Turu turu, tu. The song began as the mellotron's flute-like tones, played by Sakamoto Ryuichi, echoed through the venue. To that, Yokishi added an air of mystery to the intro of Strawberry Fields Forever, by beating the gem positioned next to his drum kit. Though only the intro had played, the crowd could feel the band's sheer spirit, a declaration that their third album would be a legendary masterpiece through a psychedelic rock sound that had never been showcased to the world quite like this before. This style has a distinct, fresh flavor to it. Paul McCartney breathed out a low exclamation of admiration at the sound of Strawberry Fields Forever, which was a total departure from Enfant Terrible's previous sonic identity. Strawberry Fields Forever was saturated with Enfant Terrible's profound understanding of sound. Paul McCartney had always thought that while the kids in Enfant Terrible certainly had incredible instincts, their technical grasp of sound was still lacking. Now he felt that these rascals had matured to a point where they could stand shoulder to shoulder with Michael Jackson. A dreamlike yet beautiful melody, lyrics drenched in nostalgia, and a dramatic arrangement that heightened the song's ethereal atmosphere. Paul McCartney couldn't help but be struck by Enfant Terrible's daring attempt. Contrasting with the song's hazy mood, Paul McCartney felt a burning passion for music radiating from Strawberry Fields Forever. The fact that a Japanese artist, who didn't even belong to the Anglosphere, had written lyrics of this caliber was worth a standing ovation in itself. Riddled with ambiguity and British slang, the lyrics of Strawberry Fields Forever left vast room for interpretation. To some, it would feel like a yearning for one's hometown; to others, it would feel like a manifesto of Enfant Terrible's philosophy. The leader often calls himself a slow-witted man, but as expected, he is truly a magnificent genius. As the song moved toward its climax, Tanaka Shuji, the perfectionist bassist of the band, felt his chest tighten with emotion. Hyde often humbled himself as someone without natural talent, but in Shuji's eyes, he was the kind of genius that only graced the world once in a lifetime. Even if his theoretical knowledge was somewhat lacking, there was no one who surpassed Hyde when it came to the raw mastery of music. Allowing himself to be swept away by that train of thought, Shuji led the track with his bass, pouring his respect for Hyde into every note. Enfant Terribles. Shuji felt a searing sense of pride in belonging to a band led by such a great man. Watch closely, everyone. See exactly who I am. Shuji wanted to show the public the quality of his performance and the weight of his existence as the bassist of Enfant Terribles. To be the right hand of the man who would become the greatest giant in the industry for a musician, there could be no more honorable position than that. Finishing his thought, Shuji added his own variation during the final instrumental bridge of the song. For a split second, Hyde and Yokishi glanced at him, but they seamlessly adjusted to Shuji's improvisation. Watching Hyde and Yokishi adapt to a variation that others would have required countless rehearsals to follow, Shuji felt a surge of pride. Once the performance ended, Hyde approached Shuji. "Shuji, tell us in advance if you're going to pull something like that." "But leader, it sounded good, didn't it?" "Well, that's true." Agreeing with Shuji, Hyde gave him a pat on the back. "Are we done with everything now?" "We still have the General Field Awards left." With the stage finished, only the final awards remained. Enfant Terribles stood ready, waiting for the most prestigious categories of the Grammy Awards. The website for reading paid chapters is available on my Patreon. The number of chapters on Patreon, 137 link, patreon.com/ultramagnus_T chapter 114, The Mightiest Giant in the Pop Music Industry 1150 words. Awards undoubtedly play a crucial role in a musician's career. However, if you were to ask if winning an award is the only way to become a great singer, the answer would be no. There have been many musicians who became legends despite a lack of formal accolades. Even the Beatles, who changed the world in my past life, didn't have as many awards as one might expect given their monumental fame. But does that mean awards are meaningless? Certainly not. Fundamentally, the act of receiving an award is a gratifying experience. And if it happens to be the most prestigious award in the world, it provides more than just a good feeling. It grants a musician undeniable authority. Who is that guy with the Big Dipper etched into his eyes? The ceremony was now approaching its climax, with only a few of the most critical awards remaining. As if to prove that reaching the Grammy Awards was no mere fluke, most of the performers were surging out in front of the audience, delivering spectacular stages. What caught my eye was Freddie Mercury, a man who had left his mark on the world as a legendary rock star in my previous life. Having only recently debuted in this world, there were still unpolished aspects compared to his peak in my memories, but Freddie Mercury was, as expected, still Freddie Mercury. What do you think about us putting together a stage like that? With our vocal colors, we can't pull off a stage like that. It might be possible for you, leader, but it's impossible for us. You're basically a cheat code talent to begin with. Tanaka Shuji and Yokishi's playful rebukes sent my attention back to the stage. While the two of them often humbled themselves regarding their vocals, their technical capability was honestly far superior to the other members of Queen, excluding Freddie Mercury himself, who were currently on stage. Just as I was about to refocus on the performance of Queen, a band that would surely skyrocket to superstardom, just as they had in my past life, I caught sight of Yokishi staring at Avril Lavigne with a slack-jawed expression. Didn't you say you got dumped recently? Hyung, I wasn't dumped. I was just ghosted. Do you really like her that much? Hyung, I have never seen such a beautiful lady in my entire life. Yokishi spoke without shifting his gaze. It seemed like he had been caught in a weird tug-of-war after meeting her at last year's Grammys, and despite the apparent rejection, he hadn't given up hope. But Yokishi, if that's the case, why did you get Sakai Izumi's phone number? Sachiko is just a friend. You know my type, don't you? It was true, Yokishi definitely preferred a more Western aesthetic over a traditional Eastern look when it came to the opposite sex. He seemed to view someone like Avril Lavigne as his ultimate ideal. She's even more beautiful than last year, prettier, more charming, like she has wings. It's fantastic. How else should I describe her? Just go with something simple like, I like you. Go tell her that and come back. Hyung, isn't that just a straight-up confession? Romance only happens when you charge ahead without looking back. Since you've already been brushed off, you need to deliver that kind of shock to create an opening in her heart. Hearing you say it, it actually makes sense. As I advised Yokishi, I recalled when I first started dating AI. I had gone on a trip with a pure desire just to spend time with her, and a confession fueled by a bit of alcohol was what kicked everything off. If you don't express yourself, no one can ever truly know your heart. That is why sincerity is everything. Once you express it, you'll get a reaction from the other person, regardless of the outcome. And if Avril Lavigne had even the slightest feelings for Yokishi, she would find her way to him. She'll probably stop by our area at least once. There's no need to rush. These are the words of an experienced man. While a nervous Yokishi waited for Avril Lavigne, the winner for Single of the Year was about to be announced. To be honest, I was anticipating this one. Single of the Year is an award given to the songwriters, and since we release all our music under the name Enfant Terribles, it belonged to us as a collective. No matter how many brilliant rookies had emerged, there was no band yet that had surpassed us. The presenter for Single of the Year was none other than Prince the Man, who had fought a fierce rivalry with Michael Jackson since their debuts, and remained a legend alongside him. Emerging onto the stage in his iconic purple suit, Prince smiled as he held the cue card containing the winner's name. And the winner is Enfant Terribles. The fruits of our labor began to fall, one by one, into the hands of Enfant Terribles, the band that had achieved a feat no one else could match. Enfant Terribles had been nominated in the following categories: Best Rock Album, Best Rock Song, Best Rock Performance, Lifetime Achievement Award, Album of the Year, Single of the Year, Record of the Year, and Songwriter of the Year. Among these, with the exception of Album of the Year, everything was already in our hands. While the other awards were magnificent, the grand prize of the Grammy Awards was undoubtedly Album of the Year. The main event of the Grammys is always Album of the Year. Tension filled the air once more. In the past, I hadn't been particularly greedy for awards, but now that I had more to protect, I needed the prestige the Grammys provided. That was why, right now, I truly wanted the Grammy for Album of the Year. The winner for Album of the Year. As the presenter spoke, my senses went numb. My ears and eyes were fixed solely on the person at the podium. The moment the presenter's lips moved after a brief pause, all sensation vanished, as if my body were floating. Then, a sudden, sharp, and rough sensation surged through my back. As my consciousness snapped back, cheers were erupting all around me. The result had finally been announced. Who was the winner? It might sound like overconfidence, but no album released in the past year had come close to our second album. The moment I turned my head, Shuji and Yokishi grabbed my shoulders and hauled me to my feet. And then I realized the fact that we had truly become the mightiest giants in the pop music industry. The website for reading paid chapters is available on my Patreon. The number of chapters on Patreon, 137 link, patreon.com/ultramagnus_t. Chapter 115, You won't know unless you say it. 1688 words. If you don't express it, they won't know. Recommended to read while listening to Liam Gallagher once. Enfants Terribles. They become legends. Enfants Terribles conquers the Grammys. First in history to successfully sweep the General Field Awards twice in a row. Even after the Grammy Awards, the momentum of Enfants Terribles did not falter. After crossing the United States, they headed for Brazil. In São Paulo, they greeted a crowd of 100,000 who had gathered just to see them, proving exactly what kind of stars they had become. Their grand journey showed no signs of ending. Russia, Poland, Switzerland, Italy, Turkey, Sweden, the Czech Republic, France, Denmark. Enfants Terribles flaunted their presence across every border, regardless of nationality. Then, Enfants Terribles' B-side album made its appearance on the Billboard charts. Featuring masterpieces like Acquiesce and Last Night on Earth, the album crushed the releases of those who claimed to be their rivals, accelerating in popularity that was already snowballing out of control. As it was a collection of B-sides often dismissed as leftover tracks, it didn't see the same astronomical sales as their studio albums. Yet, Enfants Terribles still managed to sell a staggering 9 million copies, excluding their home ground of Japan. This was definitive proof that Enfants Terribles possessed a formidable global fandom. The absolute zenith of a career that every singer encounters once was happening to Enfants Terribles right now. By the time they finished their tour in Spain and headed for the UK, the sales for both OK Computer and Nevermind had successfully surpassed 50 million copies each. The consecutive mega-successes of the first album, the second album, and the B-side album. These rascals had reached the summit everyone dreamed of. Some were satisfied with that position, while others longed for rest. However, Shuji, who possessed a fanatical desire for music more than anyone else, was not satisfied. Baldy, leader. It's only been 2 years. You can only call it a legend if it lasts 20 years. Let's work even harder. Shuji's greed was bottomless. Even if the wheels fell off and he could no longer ride the dump truck that was Enfants Terribles, he wanted to keep running just a little longer, just like this. Just because you can't go any higher doesn't mean there's a rule saying you have to stop, right? While Hyde's heart was broken somewhere and Yokishi was content with the current situation, the only reason Enfants Terribles could keep racing forward even while making creaking noises was thanks to Shuji's raw ambition. It was a night during their brief return to Japan to record the B-side album after the Grammys. Hyde, as usual, headed toward AI. After a moment's hesitation following his knock, the front door opened. AI stepped out. Despite it being late at night, she was dressed impeccably, looking as if she could step outside immediately without a single hair out of place. AI seemed slightly surprised that Hyde, who had been avoiding her since his father's visit, had come by in the middle of the night. However, she soon offered a gentle smile and opened the door for him. The half-closed door slid open fully under her touch. "Do you have a moment?" When Hyde asked, AI's voice responded with a practiced, relaxed tone that carried a hint of acting. "If it's Hyde, you're welcome to come in. I happen to have something to talk about, too." The two entered the room and closed the door. Normally, they would have noisily shared their daily lives, but today, they sat side by side on the sofa, silently watching a TV show filled with trivial jokes. During the silence, Hyde looked at AI's hands. They were quite different from when they first met. Looking at the calluses on her fingertips from playing an instrument, Hyde suddenly recalled the time he used to teach her guitar. "What should I start with?" Hyde placed his hand over AI's and spoke cautiously. "Did you hear the story?" Hyde asked, recalling that night. AI remained silent. But that silence alone was more than enough of an answer. A hollow laugh escaped Hyde's lips. He had begged Director Saito to keep it from AI, but it seemed he had failed. Only then could Hyde accurately guess why AI was wearing a mask today. AI's fingers tightened, her grip eventually digging into the skin on the back of Hyde's hand. Hyde simply held his tongue in response to her reaction. "Did you think I wouldn't know?" AI was the first to break the silence. She was staring into Hyde's eyes without wavering. She looked as if she were coldly calculating what to say next. Once she finished her thoughts, and before she spoke, she utilized her specialty to craft a perfect, deceptive smile on her face. "Are you really asking me because you don't know?" The gaze AI directed at Hyde was filled with various emotions that contrasted with the bright smile on her face. Anger, disappointment, frustration, a sense of betrayal. The negative emotions that had clouded a fragile girl's heart long ago were flickering in her eyes once more. As Hyde remained silent in the face of her words, AI finally threw away her mask, and a harsh voice erupted from her. "Who was the one who told me that sincerity was what mattered? Wasn't it Hyde who told me I was his partner, his only one?" "AI, that's still the case even now." "Then why did you just let me find out those facts through an article? Who was the one who did nothing but avoid me after that?" AI's voice was laced with burning rage and a chilling frost. In truth, AI had known from the beginning. She knew Hyde was this kind of person even before they met. Hyde is a man who always tries to shoulder everything and take all the responsibility himself. And this behavior of his doesn't change, no matter how much she, the person he claims to love most, tries to persuade him. Knowing this about Hyde only made it more agonizing for AI. AI wanted to ask him why he didn't tell her. She wanted to hug him tight and scream, asking what he had been thinking while spending time with her until now, hiding his sincerity while she had bared everything to him. Soon, AI's beautiful face contorted as if she were on the verge of tears. "Why do you always try to carry it alone? Am I just a burden to you? Do you think of me like those people who abandoned me?" Hyde remained silent for a moment before answering. "I did it because I didn't want you to suffer." "You a burden? There's no way that's true. But I don't feel like you think that way." With his dating experience from his past life, Hyde knew what AI was going to say without even hearing it. He wanted to beat up his past self for letting the situation get this far. He wanted to cover his ears right now and run away from her words. "Were you ever sincere with me? To you, was I not a partner, but just a young child who needed protection?" "I never thought of it that way." Could he really say he never thought that way? Just as AI said, there were countless times he viewed her as someone to be protected. However, that wasn't because he looked down on her, but because he wished for her happiness. But seeing that he couldn't finish his answer, AI stood up and turned her back. She was about to leave him behind completely. "No, don't go." Those words echoed repeatedly in his head, and his vision blurred. But the words to hold her back couldn't reach her, they dropped at his feet, and only the sight of AI's back grew more distant. The moment he felt a single word finally burst from his mouth, he chased after her without even putting on his shoes. By the time he reached her, his hands were moving faster than his mind. Grabbing her wrist and pulling her forcefully toward him, Hyde pulled her slender body into a tight embrace and tilted her chin up. Then, he pressed his lips against her small ones. AI's eyes widened to their limit. The kiss, so intense it was hard to breathe, lasted for a long time, as if it would never end. But soon, AI slapped Hyde across the cheek, and that was the end of it. Hearing the sharp crack ring in his ears, Hyde released her from his arms. AI's eyes were still flickering with disappointment and rage, and a trail of blood trickled down Hyde's cheek where her fingernail had grazed him during the slap. Hyde, let's take some time apart. If I say I refuse. Hyde's heart had long since been torn to shreds just by the gaze she directed at him, and the spot where her palm had struck was still burning. Yet, even to Hyde's final cry, the only thing that returned was AI's cold voice. Hyde-san, leader of Enfants Terribles. She, who had always called his name with a warm voice, was now addressing him with a formal title. Her familiar voice felt incredibly alien at that moment. I never needed your protection from the very beginning. Hyde froze as if he had lost his soul at her words. Even after AI's shadow disappeared, he didn't move from the spot, simply staring blankly at the place where she had left. Walking away with tears streaming down her face, leaving Hyde behind, AI ruthlessly crushed her own heart that wanted to look back at him. The gaze that had flickered with anger and disappointment had long since turned into a fierce determination to succeed no matter what. Hoshino AI intended to refuse being a mere lady who only received help in her lover's arms. Until she could become someone Hyde could rely on, she had no intention of returning to his embrace. Chapter 116, Side Story, Days Yet to Come. 1149 words. Side Story 1. The day the marriage registration was submitted, there were moments when Hyde felt as though he had been perfectly tamed by AI. Of course, this wasn't just a feeling, it was a cold, hard fact. Despite his 500 kilograms, Big 3, lifting strength, and his reputation as the fierce leader of Enfants Terribles, he was utterly powerless and unable to resist in the face of AI. Hyde was a man who became infinitely soft for his beloved wife, and Hoshino AI was a woman who could become stronger than anyone else for her beloved husband. AI, who had rescued Hyde from his fragile mental state and eventually led him toward marriage, knew exactly how to handle her husband. In truth, it didn't even require a method. Contrary to his public image, Hyde was nothing more than a gentle giant of a dog in her presence. What kind of expertise does one need to handle a dog that is already dying of joy, having surrendered its heart, and wagging its tail incessantly? We're a married couple now, aren't we? The Hoshino family now consisted of two members, the original Hoshino AI, and Hoshino Hyde, who had gone so far as to legally change his surname. Lately, Hyde's favorite hobby was grinning like an idiot while repeating his wife's name, which now shared his own over and over again. So does that mean Hyde is mine now, and I'm Hyde's? Hyde wanted to grab anyone, even a total stranger, and vent this joy to them. Although he had already made quite a fuss in the media several times, he wanted to shout to the whole world that he finally had a family to love. The overwhelming emotion filling his chest did not dissipate no matter how much he let it out. It lingered constantly by his side. These days, Hyde's heart was like a reservoir of happiness that never ran dry. How does it feel to belong to AI? The only answer Hyde could give to AI's question was, it's fucking great. He pulled his wife into a deep embrace. Because of the significant height difference, all he could see was the crown of her head, and her purple hair, but to Hyde, nothing in the world was more beautiful than this moment. It's fucking great. His world had shifted 180 degrees. He often expressed this to the press that it was a miracle, even to him, how a life could change so drastically. Unlike the days when he was steeped in alcohol and drugs, waking up in the morning had become a pleasure. Even if gloomy thoughts crept in as they once had, thinking of that fateful night, and his beloved, who was resting at home due to her pregnancy, granted him a newfound sense of composure. The fact that his productivity and the quality of his work skyrocketed simply because he wanted to finish quickly and see his wife's face was just a bonus. How was work today? AI could have helped a little. The reason was simple. Once everything was done, and he sped home likely earning a few speeding tickets along the way, his AI was there, waiting to welcome him, as if she had been standing by the door the entire time. The boy who had severed all his connections and fallen into a strange place, wandering in search of a place to belong, no longer existed. He was no longer alone. The realization was so monumental that Hyde often found himself moved to tears. Even if the day grew only slightly dark, the lights were already on at home. When he opened the door and entered, the space wasn't filled with cold, damp air, but with the scent of his beloved woman's shampoo. And above all, there was his wife, carrying a new life, who would call his name the moment he stepped inside. A world that had been monochromatic had finally found its true colors. It's something really trivial, but Hyde no longer hid his emotions, at least not from his partner. I never realized until now just how lonely I actually was. Swallowing the words that followed, Hyde could not withstand the tidal wave of emotion surging from deep within his chest, and began to cry. As he stood frozen at the entrance, unable to bring himself to step fully into his own home, AI comforted him. Hyde clung to her and sobbed loudly, just as he had on that fateful night. It was only the second time that Hyde, who always strove to maintain a dependable image, had broken down in tears before AI. Hyde really can't get by without AI, can he? Hyde nodded silently at AI's words. But AI, doesn't that statement work the other way around too? You caught me. Side story 2. Deciding the children's names. Have you thought about names for our children? Time flew by. While Hyde's affection for AI continued to grow during their honeymoon phase, the babies, the physical manifestation of their love, were also growing steadily in her womb. Is there something you've decided on? AI brought names that are perfect for the babies. AI, looking down fondly at her slightly swelling stomach, let out a bright smile, and began to speak while stroking her belly. If it's a boy, Aquamarine. If it's a girl, what do you think? Pretty, right? Left speechless by his wife's bizarre naming sense, Hyde looked at the grinning AI, and began to suggest the names he had come up with. AI, instead of those, what about something like Morganite, Alexandrite, or Obsidian? In Hyde's opinion, the names AI chose lacked enough rock and roll. To survive in this harsh world, they needed names imbued with the spirit of rock, like Morganite, signifying a knight who fights and overcomes the world, Alexandrite, signifying grasping the entire world in one's hand, or Obsidian, signifying living tenaciously like volcanic glass blooming from a gutter of ash. Hoshino Morganite. Hoshino Alexandrite, isn't it cool? You shouldn't play jokes with the babies' names. The Hoshino couple, engaged in an ultimate debate over the names, failed to reach a conclusion, and headed to the Saito household, the place that served as AI's family home, and Hyde's in-laws, to seek a final verdict. You damn couple. You two really were made for each other. Saito, isn't Ruby and Aquamarine better, at the very least? And so, the names decided for the children were not Morganite and Alexandrite, as Hyde had hoped in his pursuit of rock and roll, but Aquamarine and Ruby. It's much better than the names that damn scoundrel who took my lovely daughter away came up with. The website for reading paid chapters is available on my Patreon. The number of chapters on Patreon, 137. Link, patreon.com/ultramagnus_T. Chapter 117. The difference between a rock star and a professional. Typically, when people envision a band performance, they picture musicians pouring their souls into their songs on a wide, rectangular stage. This is because, unlike idol groups, bands are constrained by the physical reality of their instruments, which inherently limits their range of motion. The reason bands often communicate only through music in front of massive crowds stems partly from a musician's pathological obsession with sincerity in their craft, but fundamentally, it is rooted in the limitations of the band format itself. The act of moving around to engage directly with the audience is usually reserved for the vocalist. One only needs to look at the drums to understand why. How on earth is a drummer supposed to move while tethered to those massive, heavy pieces of gear mid-performance? However, Tanaka Shuji harbored a burning desire to make that impossible feat a reality. Leader, we've used thrust stages at various concerts before, but those were always for solo segments or parts where we didn't need the drums, right? What if we try to overcome that limitation? Baldy, sounds great in theory, but how are you going to pull it off? Yokishi tilted his head in skepticism at Shuji's suggestion. Shuji, let's just stick to what we know. Leader, you want to stick to what we know in front of 250,000 people. You of all people should know better. Fundamentally, a solo concert is a space where an artist carves their existence into the hearts of the audience. Radiating a star aura simply by existing and commanding a crowd overwhelmed by that presence is a common sight today, especially now that bands and massive sing-alongs have become normalized. The problem is physical distance. No matter how powerful a star's aura is, it becomes harder to feel the further away you are. Even if the leader's aura was blindingly intense, it would inevitably hit a limit in a venue packed with 250,000 people. As the numbers grow, fans in the back struggle with obstacles: the press of the crowd, the height of the people in front of them that pull them out of the experience. A thrust stage was the mechanism to compensate for that. If the stage extended outward, the performers could advance right into the heart of the crowd. Musicians should communicate through music. That's the law. And who was it that's been aggressively pushing for all these different performances? Wasn't that you, leader? Shuji, we're only 2 months away from Nebworth. You want to change the stage configuration now? That's exactly what you've always done. Hyde, if you can't do it, hand it over to me. We still have 2 whole months. Ever since AI suddenly began to distance herself, the leader had started crumbling at a frightening pace. While his persona as a star on stage had become flawlessly brilliant, the human side of the leader was rotting away, physically dependent on alcohol and poison like heroin, and psychologically consumed by lethargy. Even in moments like this, why does he act like someone who's ready to leave? Like nothing matters? The leader of the past would have jumped at my idea. Nebworth, set to be the largest concert in history, was still 2 months away, and with the relaxed schedule, there was plenty of time to refine the concept. Hey, Hyde. Snap out of it. We're pros. Professionals who have to show the public our best at all times. If you keep acting like this, I'm going to knock some sense into you. Is there anyone in this room more pro than me? Who else here is professional enough to provide the public with the perfect gossip alongside the music, acting the part of the star? Yeah, you're a pro, all right. But is a man who's lost his will to live, lying there and smoking his life away on junk, really a rock star? Enfant terribles weren't just professionals, they were rock stars. And if you're a rock star, shouldn't you be obsessed with making the stage more spectacular and driving the crowd into a frenzy? While I spent my spare time studying the performances of other artists to improve our own show, the leader was lying there, high on heroin. Baldy, Hyde, both of you calm down. If you don't stop, I'll fold you both in half. And Baldy, if we do a thrust stage, how do you plan to handle the cables? In a live venue, band instruments are hardwired to amplifiers to produce sound. Naturally, the length of those cables has a physical limit. If we were some pop dance group just singing and shaking our asses, we could roam a thrust stage freely. But we were a band. Sakamoto, didn't we struggle like hell in LA because of the cables? The staff were literally swearing while they worked. Sakamoto Ryuichi was right. Back in LA, dozens of staff members were mobilized just to manage the cables, and even then, we almost tripped over them several times. There's no need to push it. A standard front-facing setup is enough to win anyway. The leader has a point. I conceded to the leader's words. In truth, you don't need a thrust stage for a successful band performance. But if we pull it off, we'll become even more special. We are rock stars. Icons who blaze trails others won't take, who run toward things we hate just to smash them into pieces because that's what we feel like doing. Aren't you excited? Showing the world something on the biggest stage possible that no other amateur can even dream of. Baldy, now that's a thought that gets the blood pumping. So what's the plan then? Sakamoto asked me. But I had no answer for him. I don't know. But for now, we just do it. Wasn't Unfonterables a gathering of rock stars? Refusing a challenge just because we might fail, that was never our way. Chapter 118, Preparing for the Succession. 1122 words, everyone. Are you happy? You're happy because you're jumping. I immersed myself in the concert of a famous solo singer named Psy, who had crossed over from Korea, Japan's neighbor across the sea, to take the Billboard charts by storm. Despite having only recently entered the American market, he was sparking a full-blown syndrome. His flamboyant movements and stage presence, perfectly optimized for large-scale concerts, were already becoming legendary. Champion you, who screams? The man, who had been dancing with a troupe of performers, suddenly sprinted up a flight of stairs integrated into the stage. As he reached the top, the structure shifted, and an immense volume of water began to cascade over the crowd like a waterfall. To someone like me, who primarily utilized light for visual impact, a stage that weaponized water was a fresh, visceral shock. Following that, he looked down upon the mass of people like a DJ, conducting the audience while he belted out the lyrics. Every gesture of this star, every choreographed performance, sent the crowd's adrenaline into a fever pitch. Damn, this is it. It was electrifying. While our focus was on choral harmonies and ensemble playing, this man was communicating with his audience on a far more relentless level. Wouldn't that style work for us too? He modified the lyrics on the fly and rearranged the tracks on the spot to match the tempo of the fans. Mastering his music with total freedom, he suddenly charged out onto the protruding runway like a tank. Seeing him dominate that secondary stage alongside his dancers, I found myself performing a vulgar dance quite unbecoming of a rock star. The very same courting dance I had once performed for my girlfriend. Regardless, he continued through several more songs, maintaining that unbroken line of communication with the spectators. I want to build a stage like that too. As I let my body surrender to the exhilaration of the performance, I etched every detail of his stage methodology into my mind. I hope you all have a happy day. Where are you going? Bullshit. Have you started doing drugs like Hyde? Miyazaki Makoto. The man serving as both producer and manager for Unfonterables immediately voiced his opposition to the bizarre stage concept brought forward by Tanaka Shuji, the bassist. Wait, why? Isn't it great to just play with the crowd? I even wrote a song that fits perfectly with it. You idiot. You're a band, not a group of dance idols. Connecting with the audience. Sure, that's important. But looking into that singer you mentioned, he's been performing that way since his debut. It's his identity, and that's why it gets a reaction. But you guys? Miyazaki Makoto calmly reasoned with Shuji, who was agonizing over how to make the Nebworth stage the greatest show on earth. Our strengths are the ensemble play and the massive sing-alongs. Other performances are just secondary fluff. You're going to throw that away. I was a broadcast PD once, so I can see that singer's concert is killer, but his characteristics are fundamentally different from ours. Damn it. My "we will rock you" concept. To think it would be buried like this. Shuji began to vigorously rub his shiny, bald head. Before arriving in the UK, the members of Unfonterables were deep in discussion regarding the Nebworth performance. Aside from Hyde, the members were racked with anxiety over how to craft the most world-shaking stage possible. Designing a stage was just as grueling as producing an entire album. While delegating it to an agency or an event planning firm would have been much easier, Unfonterables refused. A solo concert is a space where artists carve their existence into the hearts of the audience. Leaving such a crucial task to a third party was simply not something a rock star would do. And above all, Unfonterables never knew the meaning of complacency. Were they not a collection of troublemakers who craved more even after seizing the world? Damn it, if only Hyde were in his right mind, this would be so much easier. Miyazaki Makoto glanced at Hyde, who was standing further back, smoking a cigarette. Historically, Hyde held the initiative within Enfant Terribles because he was the most pioneering and creative figure regarding both songwriting and live direction. Of course, Hyde was thinking about the stage in his own way, matching the effort the others were putting in. Before you worry about the gimmicks, you need to structure the stage itself. Shuji, there are several types of protruding runways. Think about those first. The foundation of any stage design starts with determining its basic shape. As expected of the leader. Even if his head is a bit fried, the leader is still the leader. Shuji, the band's bald bassist, kept scribbling furiously in a sketchbook. Leveraging his experience and knowledge from his past life, Hyde continued to pour inspiration into him. Because there isn't much time left for us to be together. The most versatile shape is likely the circle. It provides plenty of space for all of us to run toward, and it gives the impression of a second stage. If you're considering a runway, it's best to use this as your baseline. It's the most effective for a band. Ohu. Are there others? Cross shapes and baseball stadium layouts. Idol groups use those a lot. They're perfect for spreading out across the venue. If the harmony of the sound isn't the absolute priority, nothing beats them. The stadium layout is great for interacting with as many fans as you want, like you mentioned, but it's difficult for us to pull off properly. And remember, you don't have to stick to just one. You can blend two styles or try something else entirely. Whatever you do with your skills, it'll be a success. Aren't you going to do it, leader? I think it's about time I passed the torch. As Hyde took a pull from his beer with an expression of one who had let go of everything, Shuji began to chant a single word repeatedly. Disassemble. Assemble. This is art. Art is an explosion. He'll do just fine without me now. Watching Shuji, Hyde let a faint smile play across his lips. Shuji possessed an incredible talent. Specifically, when it came to deconstructing and reconfiguring things, he showed a startling genius that defied comparison. Knowing this, Hyde was content to wait patiently. Like someone preparing to depart for a place far away, he was readying the world for the time after his disappearance. The website for reading paid chapters is available on my Patreon. The number of chapters on Patreon, 137 link, patreon.com/ultramagnus_T chapter 119, preparing for the succession. 1616 words. Recommended listening, Hell's Bells by AC ADC. Nebworth. A remote location in England that barely appeared on any maps. Over Nebworth Park, situated in this humble region, the sunset was beginning to bleed beautifully across the sky. Nebworth Park, which existed primarily because most of the area was unoccupied wasteland, was the largest mega-concert venue in the UK, capable of accommodating 250,000 people. In this place, where only the stars among stars with absolute ticket power were permitted to perform, the highlight of Enfant Terrible's third album tour was about to unfold. Whose idea was it to only do 3 days? Even 7 days wouldn't have been enough. For context, the number of people who attempted to book tickets was approximately 16 million, roughly 25% of the UK population. Among them, only 750,000 were lucky enough to set foot in Nebworth. Yet, that alone was sufficient to set the record for the highest attendance in British history. To put it another way, Enfant Terribles were about to write a new page in the history books of the United Kingdom. This is going to be historic. In a Britain thrown into chaos by the Great Recession triggered by the subprime mortgage crisis in the US and the subsequent September movement sparked by citizens' fury at the exposed limits of the social system, the hottest topic of conversation was, what will Enfant Terribles show us next? True to their name, Enfant Terribles had consistently whipped crowds into a frenzy with all sorts of unpredictable performances. Didn't they do an EDM concept show in France? The members were panting amazingly hard after that, right? Did you see that video? In Italy, that guy Sakamoto fell while walking out on the protruding stage and grabbed his leg. It was fucking hilarious. What kind of stage will they bring this time? Those guys are different from the other rookies. The air was thick with the chatter of expectation. However, there was someone who wasn't entirely pleased with the talk. If you're a band, shouldn't you just focus on singing well? Performance? That doesn't keep the vibe alive. At the end of the day, a band has to speak through their songs. If it were me, I wouldn't have done it that way. This was Robert Plant, a man known for his good looks in the West Midlands of England. He had become a fan as if by destiny after hearing Stairway to Heaven, the first single on Fonterrables released even before their full-length album. Robert Plant was particularly infatuated with Shuji and the band for creating such a masterpiece of the century. Of course, he had never actually been to one of their concerts until now. The reason was simple: he had lost the ticket war so many times it felt like God was personally hindering him. Getting a look at their faces is bloody difficult, he grumbled. He muttered while waving the ticket he'd obtained through a stalker who had been following him around. This internet booking thing, or whatever, is so fucking hard. Though he was still a young man, for some reason, the internet proved to be an insurmountable challenge for him. There are way too many people here. Until now, no singer had truly filled Knebworth Park to this extent. The previous record for Knebworth House was held by that moron Robbie Williams back in 2003, who drew 120,000 people. But on Fonterrables' solo concert was set to surpass all of that. No matter what, songs are everything to a band. The rest is just window dressing. Of course, Fonterrables' skill was undeniable. Having secured the ticket through some adult business with his stalker, he knew he wouldn't regret coming. It was just his firm belief that a band's performance shouldn't be excessive, so the band's obsession with stage production felt slightly uncomfortable to him. It would have been a disaster if I'd gotten standing tickets. Having started an indie band called the Yardbirds, Robert Plant knew the terrifying power of a stadium crowd. Watching the ocean of people swaying in the standing area made him click his tongue in awe. Look at those fucking lights, how many are there? In the pubs I play at, I'd be grateful for just 3. The first thing that commanded attention on stage was an obscene number of massive, majestic spotlights. Fonterrables were already famous for their masterful use of light. Watching the lights pan and adjust their angles in perfect sync was enough to inspire reverence in anyone running a band. Though Robert Plant was conservative regarding stage setup, he had no issue with the use of light. Without light, how could a star communicate with the audience? What is that stupid protruding thing? It's not like there's some pop dance group shaking their arses. But there was one thing he hated: the catwalk, a stage extension rarely seen in rock bands. For idols, sure, but for a band, a protruding stage often lowered the quality of the live audio. Fonterrables are bigger idiots than I thought. A band has to make their stand with the music. I don't think that's necessarily true. Rather, those things provide a sense of variety, don't they? Robert Plant turned his head to see a long-haired man with an East Asian appearance approaching with a smile. I'm Jimmy Page. I'm a fan of those rascals. Robert Plant. Do those morons do this sort of thing often? But they pull off incredible things without ever losing their rock fundamentals. I have my own band too, but I'm often struck by how great they are. Since the men spoke so highly of them, Robert Plant decided to reserve judgment for a moment. Shortly after, the giant LED screens behind the stage began to flash numbers, signaling the start. They were accompanied by a spectacular dance of pyrotechnics and lasers. As the countdown reached 0, the lights began to extinguish one by one. Then, a massive, tolling bell began to resonate in the ears of Jimmy Page and Robert Plant. Simultaneously, on a massive set located beside the main stage, the members of Fonterrables began to hammer on a giant gate that looked like the entrance to hell. The size of the gate was abnormal, a 10-meter-high monolith fit for a demon king. The tolling grew louder. As the sound reached a deafening roar, the massive gate swung open, and the members of Fonterrables revealed themselves. Behind Fonterrables, a horned demon of immense size, boasting muscles like Ronnie Coleman, struck a front double biceps pose, manifesting its majesty. As the demon shifted into a side chest pose, the 10-meter gate slammed shut with a thunderous crash. I've never heard this song before. Enfants Terribles are famous for debuting new tracks at their live shows. Judging by this style, it looks like Yokishi composed this one. Jimmy Page explained kindly to Robert Plant. Whatever the case, seeing a giant demon strike a front double biceps pose, and hearing a brand new song at a live show was a first for Robert Plant. Then, the stage lights moved. They shifted away from the main center stage where bands usually performed, illuminating the protruding catwalk. At the center of the protruding stage stood Hyde. At the other 3 points extending toward the audience were Shuji, Yokishi, and Sakamoto respectively. If you look at it closely, it looks like a ship's steering wheel. A direct, primal melody surged forward. As flames and light swirled, Hyde's rasping, gravelly vocals and the skilled playing of the other members began to churn the air of Nebworth Park. This is actually impressive. They're getting that kind of sound on a protruding stage. Without hand syncing. As someone who managed a band, Robert Plant had suspected hand syncing, but looking at the side of the stage, he could clearly see amplifiers with wires connected. It was the real deal. Then what about the center stage? With that question, Plant looked back toward the center. There he saw a duplicate of Yokishi's drum kit. They solved it by just putting 2 sets out. That's a brutally simple solution. They struggled with the drums during the last tour, so they seem to have found their own answer. Look over there. Shuji was performing his trademark, goofy snake dance, while Sakamoto shook his head and body, radiating pure excitement. And Hyde was singing in what had now become his signature pose, hands clasped behind his back, leaning forward with his hips pushed out. Robert Plant watched the performance with the feeling of a junior learning from his seniors. From the standing area, he was close enough to see the members right in front of him. The rascals of Enfants Terribles were flaunting their talent, playing their hearts out right next to him. The protruding stage, it's more useful than I thought. Food always tastes better when you can see the cooking process with your own eyes. The same logic applied to music. The protruding stage allowed the audience to see the members more vividly, accentuating the band's strengths. I called them morons. I was the fucking idiot. Enfants Terribles were still providing lessons to the bands that would follow them. They were the group boasting the most flamboyant performance in the current rock scene. At the same time, they were the band guiding the direction of countless groups springing up like mushrooms across the globe. 2 great men who would one day form the band known as Led Zeppelin were receiving a masterclass at Nebworth from those even greater than themselves. Chapter 120, Preparing for the Succession. 1964 words. I recommend reading this while listening to Karma Police by Radiohead. As I mentioned before, for an artist, a solo concert is virtually the only space where a star can truly showcase their essence and charm to their fans. There are other avenues, such as press interviews or television appearances, but those are merely secondary. Ultimately, an artist proves their worth through music, and it is through that music that fans fall for them. As proof, the sight of a performer radiating a natural aura while the audience is swept away by it has become a common spectacle by now, hasn't it? However, when the physical distance is too great, it becomes difficult for an artist to truly connect with the crowd. To solve this, a new type of protruding thrust stage was designed and introduced. In this format, a performer can venture right into the heart of the crowd. But why? Why does the leader look like he's at the end of something, rather than the beginning? A sea of sparkling pen lights surrounds me as I play the bass. The sight of everyone encircling us, fueled by a burning passion for our music, is breathtaking. The dopamine rush from this view can only be understood by those who have experienced it. Yet, in this very moment, our leader wears an expression that suggests everything is rushing toward a final conclusion. Leader. What on earth are you thinking? The expression on Hyde's face is not that of a man writing history with his own hands. We are scheduled to mobilize 750,000 people over the course of 3 days. We are set to deliver the greatest performance the world will ever remember, playing before a crowd of a scale that will likely never be seen again. Even at this pinnacle where eccentrics who were once met with nothing but contempt in Japan have risen in just a few years from rookies to giants, leaving an eternal mark, the leader is not enjoying the stage. In that moment, Shuji recalls a conversation he once had with Hyde. "Leader, do you think another massive band like Enfant Terribles can ever emerge again?" "Of course. We were the ones who broke the dam, but greater bands will come after us." "No, there won't be another band like us. We were a nameless group of brats who had never even written a proper song, starting with nothing but a hunger to devour the whole world." "What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying that as long as there isn't another person like you, Hyde, a band as great as Enfant Terribles cannot exist. For the sake of rock's future, we need you." But the leader merely shook his head at those words, wearing a faint smile that looked as if he had let go of everything. "Shuji, when it comes to the way, even if the times change, even if the path taken to reach that point is different, one eventually arrives at the same destination. Even without me. And I'm not as great as you think. Contrary to public rumor, my talent is nothing more than a mere handful. Even if I were to vanish, it wouldn't cause a massive ripple in music history. Not that I'm saying I'm going to disappear, of course." Ever since the relationship between AI and the leader turned cold, he had frequently acted like someone preparing to leave. While he occasionally returned to his old self when performing as a star or handling music, outside of that, he was mostly steeped in medication and lethargy. Shuji had left him be out of respect and admiration, but the underlying anxiety was something he couldn't shake. "Damn it. I don't know why you vanished, but please come back soon, AI. The golden spotlights shine down on me like sunlight." Oasis's Rock and Roll Star is a song deep with meaning that we've used as our opening number since our debut. Much like it was for Oasis in the past, it has become the ultimate self-fulfilling prophecy for us. The lyrics of Rock and Roll Star are filled with ambition and confidence, shouting, "Tonight I'm a rock and roll star." At that time, I was confident. How could I fail to make a hit song when I was stealing inspiration from the greats of my past life? However, I never expected the scale of things to grow this massive. I lean into the microphone, shouting the very lyrics I just thought of. 3 idiots whose futures looked pitch black gathered to form an unknown band called Enfant Terribles. We charged into a Sion with that raw ambition, won, and rose to become Japan's first and greatest global band. Back then, I feared nothing and could enjoy life without any shackles. Honestly, there are many times when I think I lived a life more like a rock star back then than I do now. I gained everything, but I lost everything. That has been my life since becoming a star. I'm a bit disappointed. Is this the loudest you can scream? At Nebworth House, where 250,000 people have gathered, I put on the mask of the ideal rock star I've always imagined and head over to Shuji, banging my head. Regardless of the artist's personal life, the fans in the crowd should be excited and having fun. That is the duty of a rock star. The thrust stage Shuji created was shaped like a ship's helm. Even in my past life, I hadn't seen a band create something like this. In the first place, a standard band probably wouldn't have felt the need for such a thing. But Shuji, unlike before when he focused solely on the music, now actively utilizes every element of the concert. It seemed like Shuji wanted to transcend the limitations of the band concept I had introduced to this world. This guy will do just fine, even without me. After looking at Shuji for a moment, I reach out toward the audience, high-fiving the fans before heading toward Yokishi. Originally, the drums are the position that works the hardest yet stands out the least. That's why we intentionally placed Yokishi's setup at the deepest part of the standing area. Though he was often overshadowed by me who doubled as guitarist and vocalist and the naturally flashy Shuji, no one played a more vital role in the band than Yokishi. The reason Enfant Terribles could maintain such a close-knit bond was largely thanks to him. Unlike the somewhat self-centered Shuji, Yokishi was sensitive to the emotions of others. He was the kind of person who considered me family in just a few short years. Even when I was out of it on drugs, Yokishi was the one who consistently visited to feed me protein shakes and supplements. A guy with a tender heart, despite those visible muscles. While I am lost in those thoughts, Yokishi is pounding the drums, his muscles fully on display. While singing, I look at the drums Yokishi is playing, and we lock eyes. Yokishi smiles. Seeing that smile, I smile back. In response, Yokishi's hands lift higher than usual as he begins to produce a more powerful sound. As he drums, his massive trapezius muscles roll, and his shoulders shrug with the rhythm, and the crowd begins to roar in response. Now that AI has left my side, Yokishi is the only family I have made since coming to this world. Now that you've heard the ambition of our rookie days, shouldn't you hear a story from when we've become a bit more mature? Our set lists are created after deciding on a central concept. And the concept for Nebworth House was the grand summation. Sakamoto signals by playing a synthesizer piano tone. It is the signal that I need to pick up my guitar, though it is an acoustic one this time. As I take up the instrument, the audience signals their readiness for us to start. Karma Police. Karma Police is a song containing political messages and social criticism. Specifically, it is a critique of a corporate society that functions like a giant gear, where the individual is not permitted to exist. It's a contradictory song for someone like me to sing, someone trapped in a giant gear, and unable to escape, but regardless, it was considered the masterpiece of our second album. The upright piano and acoustic guitar begin to spread the lyrical melody of Karma Police. Even if we are trapped in a giant gear, letting out groans of pain, the gear does not break. In a way, Karma Police is a song that mirrors my own situation. The narrator of Karma Police takes on the role of a thought policeman, who prevents party members from thinking contrary to the party. Though they initially rebel against the massive gear, after struggling to survive, they eventually assimilate into the organization themselves. The narrator is a tragic figure. In the end, I have become that half-baked star, a bundle of contradictions that I hated so much. This is your karma. The karma for getting entangled with us. There was a feeling Oasis, the band I loved in my past life, felt when they performed at Nebworth House. But it felt more like an end than a beginning. Only now can I understand the sentiment of Oasis in my past life when they reached their peak and let everything explode at Nebworth. Holy shit. This is what rock is. Tom York, who had rushed to Nebworth House with a friend, is waving his penlight and joining the sing-along for Karma Police. Enfants terribles, often called the symbol of the people, were paradoxically always mysterious figures to their fans. It was because on stage, they shone more brilliantly and perfectly than anyone else. And the stage, utilizing the thrust platform, did more than just physically close the distance with the audience, it showed a different side of Enfants terribles. At Nebworth, the fans could vividly feel the presence of the other members, who had previously been somewhat obscured by the overwhelming presence of the vocalist, Hyde. Look at Shuji's snake dance. He's the best in the world at being ridiculous. I love it. Yokishi, his muscles are insane. Why isn't he a bodybuilder? Sakamoto waved at me. He looks even better in person. Through the thrust stage, the audience could choose exactly what they wanted to see. Being able to pick and choose whose movements and actions to focus on during each song was nothing short of innovative for the fans. In a band, the guitarist and vocalist usually hog the spotlight. As proof, isn't the vocalist usually the one who takes the title of frontman, the face of the band? However, the new form of the thrust stage gave the fans a fresh shock by showing them the members in a way they hadn't seen before. They even made eye contact and joked around with fans when it wasn't their specific part. Right now, Yokishi is even throwing flirtatious looks at female fans. Isn't this spreading Hyde's presence too thin? While he should have been happy as a fan of Enfants terribles, Tom York couldn't purely enjoy the situation. It was rare for a band's frontman to distribute the focus directed at himself to the other members. Why does this feel like a succession ceremony? Such a strange thought crossed his mind, but since this was Nebworth House, and he had paid a lot of money to be here, Tom York soon cleared the stray thoughts from his head to focus on the stage. The website for reading paid chapters is available on my Patreon. The number of chapters on Patreon, 137 link, Patreon. com/ultramagnus_t chapter 121, Preparing for the Succession. I recommend reading this while listening to Aerosmith's I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. Generally, in a band, the vocalist and the guitarist hog all the spotlight. That is simply the nature of the beast. However, the new thrust stage setup debuted at Nebworth Park diluted the spotlight usually reserved for Hyde. With the vast expanse of Nebworth Park as his stage, Hyde was busy sprinting from left to right. Of course, this had become a fairly common sight since Sakamoto joined the lineup, but the fans were seeing something new: the intricate finger work of the other members on their respective instruments, their unique body language for every song, and their raw facial expressions. The spotlight swept over Tanaka Shuji, Yokishi, and Sakamoto in turn. The audience found this new stage configuration refreshing. Although Enfant Terribles was never truly a one-man show, the fans' gaze had historically gravitated toward Hyde rather than Shuji or Yokishi. I used to feel like this was Hyde's one-man team, but seeing them now, I guess that wasn't it. Look at Shuji go. That guy really knows how to play the crowd, doesn't he? In the early days of his career, Shuji's somewhat self-centered personality made it difficult for him to connect with fans. But through the advice and accumulated experiences of various idols he'd befriended, he had become remarkably adept. Give it up for the muscleman over there working his hair off. Whenever it wasn't his part to play, Shuji locked eyes with the fans and joked around. Between regulating the pace of the stage and finding the perfect timing to grab the mic, his showmanship had reached a state of maturity. Following Shuji's lead, the crowd's attention shifted to Yokishi. He was the sturdy, towering tree that anchored the music of Enfant Terribles. Within the band, one could say Hyde was the soul and Shuji was the heart, which left Yokishi as the backbone. Not just a drummer who struck skins and brass, but the kind who encouraged everyone through the hardest times and kept them moving forward. Yokishi's playing definitely lives up to those muscles. All the audience saw when they looked at Yokishi was the sight of him gripped by a feverish intensity, hammers of wood beating the drums. In truth, this was the fate of a drummer. In any given song structure, the guitar or bass usually has parts where they can rest, but a drummer rarely enjoys such luxury. Rest is virtually non-existent, and it's the same for any band. A band without a drum is like a ship without a rower. Thus, even before 250,000 people, Yokishi did nothing but strike his drums with passionate violence. You guys do just fine without me. In contrast to the drums, the most dispensable entities in a band were the vocalist and the guitarist. Bassists and drummers are notoriously hard to find, but guitarists and vocalists are so common you could trip over them in the street. Even the guitar work was increasingly being handed over to Sakamoto. Now my role within Enfant Terribles had shrunk to something quite small. It's your turn now, boss. Time for the leader to step up. As the song ended, the members began heading toward the center stage one by one. Everyone except Hyde. He sat down on the railing of the thrust stage. Hyde could see the fans pressing their bodies against the barricades. Flashing a smile at them, Hyde gripped the microphone. I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. This was a single Hyde had hurriedly recorded and released during the world tour. It had soared to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 the moment it was released, a rare rock ballad for Enfant Terribles, filled with lyrical, sentimental lines that didn't quite fit their usual rebellious image. Seated there, he began to sing as if sharing a sincere, whispered story with the audience. Happiness always has a way of shattering without warning. I could still recall the scenery of that dim night with tactile clarity down to the crescent moon that shone over me as I trudged along. How could I ever forget? The rhythmic thud of my heart that quickened strangely with every step away, the hallway that felt unusually deathly quiet that day, and the vivid sound of my own receding footsteps echoing in my ears. When happiness breaks, the world turns to monochrome. How many times have I chewed over that day, nearly collapsing under the weight of my own self-loathing? I had become the rock star I dreamed of being all my life, yet I had nothing left. My former self-assurance had vanished without a trace, and the family I thought I'd finally built had left my side. At this moment, with everything that made me gone, what am I even existing for? Rather than losing my reason for being and slowly fading away, it would be better to just burn out all at once. I've only run this far out of a sense of responsibility as a rock star, and out of loyalty to Shuji and Yokishi. And now that Enfant Terribles and the genre of rock itself are finally back on track, now was the moment for me to disappear like smoke. Hyde, who had squeezed his eyes shut while singing, snapped them open. As he did, a tear that had been clinging to the corner of his eye traced a line down his face. The moment the first day of the now legendary Nebworth Park concert ended and he stepped down from the stage, Hyde's silhouette crumpled to the floor. The expression on the fallen Hyde's face was incredibly peaceful. He didn't look like he was in pain. He looked merely like someone who had drifted off to sleep. The problem, however, was that his breath was growing fainter by the second. Leader. Chapter 122, Side Story, The Girl at That Moment. While Hyde was stirring up storms across the Eurasian continent in the UK, a smaller tempest was beginning to brew within Japan. In a luxury apartment located in the heart of Tokyo. Flutter. A stack of papers on the table slid over, making an unpleasant rustling sound. The room belonged to a girl, but it was a total disaster. There were traces suggesting it might have once been pleasant and cute, fitting for a girl of her age, but now dust gathered in every corner, and the place was filthy. Instruments lay scattered across the floor alongside papers that had lost their value, drifting like fallen leaves. It was hard to find a place to step. If not for the bed sitting in the middle of the room, one might doubt if a human actually lived there. And on that bed, a girl with purple hair was fast asleep, desperately catching up on lost rest. "You damn star. I'm coming to pick you up right now, so get ready to head to the airport immediately." The one waking the girl from her nap was Saito Ichigo, her legal father and the CEO of Strawberry Productions. "President Ichigo. Today is AI's songwriting day, so if it's personal business, I really can't." The girl felt a pang of resentment toward her father for ruining her rare nap. She staggered toward the chair in front of the computer, where a MIDI program was already running. What caught her eye was her own reflection on a second monitor that hadn't been turned off. Her hair was a tangled mess from the hours spent composing, and her skin looked parched and dry, unbefitting of her youth. In her purple eyes, the asterism-shaped stars that usually brimmed with life were now weighed down by deep exhaustion. If she chose to smile, she could masterfully project the aura of a star suitable for her age, but currently, her face was devoid of all expression. "Was the song I was working on last night, creak, creak." Having found the file she had spent all night crafting, the girl leaned toward the monitor, a habit she had developed recently. "AI has to work a little harder, or else we won't even make it to America, let alone the Billboard charts." Stripping away the light of her artificial performance, Bikomachi was beginning to race faster toward the place where Enfant Terribles resided. And the reason that was even possible was because, since that specific night, AI's songwriting talent, which had previously only shown glimpses of potential, had completely blossomed. Click, click. Organizing her thoughts, she gripped the mouse and began navigating the now familiar software. The lyrics were already finished. All that remained was to weave a melody that suited the words. As she began to sculpt the track, she drew upon the experiences of her own life. Since Bikomachi was an idol group and not a rock band, she had to construct the music using a wider variety of digital instruments. For a girl who had been exposed to various sounds from a very young age, this was a simple task. How should she structure the chord progression? She had heard that most singers use so-called money chords without a second thought, but the girl had no desire to use such things. Her life was not some cliché that could be contained within such predictable progressions. Instead of money chords, she progressed the track with the strange notes and rhythms that surfaced in her mind. G, G, B, F music must be simple. That was the composition philosophy she had learned from her lover. However, unlike her lover, the girl was inclined to actively use various sound sources and effects. Maybe this song would be fine with just an acoustic guitar. She finished the first draft of the composition and listened to the track. It wasn't bad, but the sound felt hollow in certain places. After a moment of contemplation, She added drum samples via the MIDI program, injecting a sense of impact into the track. The occasional heavy thud of the kick drum added a rhythmic interest to the song. She didn't stop there. She delicately layered electronic synths throughout the gaps. After completing this second round of work, she listened to the song again. After listening for a long time, the girl nodded her head, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. What should I call the song? The girl often had a high opinion of her own naming sense, but objectively speaking, her taste in titles was usually bizarre. Because of that, the titles of her songs were often decided by others, but this time, she didn't want that to happen. A song containing her own life, titled by someone else. For someone who had developed a certain pride as a composer, that was unacceptable. This will do, Idol. That was the name she gave to her newly completed masterpiece. The website for reading paid chapters is available on my Patreon. The number of chapters on Patreon, 137 link, patreon.com/ultramagnus_T chapter 123, side story extra, a conversation you won't remember. An unfamiliar, yet familiar ceiling. After finishing a performance in front of 250,000 spectators, the sight that met my eyes when I opened them again was something deeply familiar, yet strangely alien. This is my studio apartment. The image of the room where I used to live alone, a memory that had been growing hazy, began to burn vividly into my vision. Seeing that the arrangement of my belongings hadn't changed, and that dust had settled thickly over everything, it seemed a significant amount of time had passed since the day I was hit by that truck. Was it all just a dream? I was performing in front of 250,000 people just a moment ago, and now I'm back in my apartment surrounded by Korean text. Unable to process the reality of the situation, I pulled my smartphone out of my pocket and tried to turn it on. The battery was completely dead, as if to prove exactly how much time had slipped away. Tracing back through my blurred memories, I eventually managed to find a charger and plugged it in. With a heavy sigh, I collapsed into the chair in front of my computer. No, seriously, what is going on? Bzzzzzt. What pulled me out of my contemplation was the relentless, overwhelming barrage of phone notifications. KakaoTalk, $9.99 plus unread messages. $9.99 plus missed calls message, you crazy bastard. What the hell do you think you're doing, just vanishing like that? You're fired, you son of a bitch. Yeah, this is more like my life. At least this feels straightforward. This was my original life. A mundane existence where I was pushed around and barely had a proper place to lay my head, yet a life where I never let go of my dreams despite it all. Since I had been gone for so long, the first person I met was, naturally, my best friend. That meeting inevitably led to a round of drinks. I usually had a high tolerance for alcohol, but since I was sharing glasses with a lifelong friend I hadn't seen in forever, it was only natural that I failed to pace myself. Seriously. Do I look like the kind of guy who'd bullshit you about something like this? As a result, reaching a state of total intoxication and spilling my guts with drunken sincerity was an inevitable progression. I'm telling you, I think I went to the world of that Oshi no Ko anime. My mind was reeling so much that my memories kept slipping, but as my friend listened, his expression remained unchanged, as if he already knew everything. If someone who had disappeared for over 2 years suddenly returned and said something like this, the normal reaction would be to worry about their mental state or treat them like a total lunatic. Yet, he remained perfectly calm. Then again, we had seen the absolute best and worst of each other, so maybe he was just rolling with it. I started a band there. I fell in love. I even performed on a stage in front of 250,000 people. But I guess it was a dream. Was it because we were the kind of friends who shared our most pathetic moments? Even though I was incapacitated by the alcohol, I found myself pouring out my heaviest burdens to him. But there were still so many reasons why I should have stayed in that dream. I had so many responsibilities there. My brain was pickled in alcohol, making my memories fuzzy, but the expression on my face at that moment must have been a sight to behold. I still had so much left to settle. I had to apologize to AI too. I think I missed the life where I wasn't bound by anything when I was over there, but can I really just bury those memories and move on? But you know better than anyone that I'm not the kind of person who's numb enough to just bury memories like that. The version of you I know is the type to suffer until he finally just lets go of himself. Perhaps I even grabbed my friend's shoulder and sobbed uncontrollably. What should I do? Just go back. Your family is over there, not here, isn't it? How much time had passed? My friend, who had been quietly responding while emptying bottle after bottle, asked me a question at the very moment my sense of time became a blur. In the end, do you want to go back? I can't just leave that girl behind. How could I ever leave her? The moment I finished those words, the thin film of my consciousness, which had been barely hanging on, finally snapped. Then you have to go back. And you better do it right this time, you bastard. Chapter 124, The Boiling Frog, a ceiling I don't recognize. In a sterile white room, a beautiful blonde boy slowly opens his eyes. The boy's name is Hyde. He is a titan of the pop music industry, serving as both the frontman and leader of the world-renowned band Enfants Terribles. Did I collapse? A man who had seized everything the world had to offer as a star, had tried to turn his back on reality and escape from existence itself. He turned to drugs to blur a mind that was far too vivid, and he spent his days drowned in alcohol to vent his emotions through its borrowed strength. The problem, however, was that he was still a physically immature minor. Even though the amounts of drugs and alcohol his underdeveloped body consumed were relatively small, they placed a massive strain on his constitution. Leader. Big bro. As he woke, the bald bassist and the muscular mixed-race drummer men, who were more like family than bandmates, rushed toward him. Yet, rather than offering them a smile, Hyde only wore a bitter grin. It's better to burn out than to fade away. Like Kurt Cobain, he wished to vanish in a flash of flame rather than slowly flicker out. This desire was amplified by his status as an icon who dominated an era, and the king of his genre. A king is never forgotten, even in death. If such a king were to become a legend and vanish at the absolute peak of his prime, what a dramatic story that would be. He would be remembered eternally, for as long as popular culture existed. It's not like I'm dead. Why are you acting like this just because I passed out for a second? Hyde, you almost crossed the sticks. The reason he chose to remain in this world at the crossroads of life and death, abandoning the golden opportunity to achieve eternal legend, was that he still had lingering attachments. Unlike Kurt Cobain, who sought nirvana after losing his sense of family, Hyde still had a connection with people he could call true family, even if those bonds were on the verge of snapping. The sticks. Makoto, are you saying I actually almost died? First, you're quitting the drugs. We start over from there. There is a story about the boiling frog, a frog that dies slowly inside a pot of heating water. A frog thrown into already boiling water would be startled and jump out, but if it is placed in water that gradually warms, it remains unaware of the danger until it unknowingly reaches the end of its life. This parable applies to humans as well. Humans often respond efficiently to sudden changes, but in the face of a slowly approaching disaster, they fail to perceive the shift. Trapped in the inertia of gradual change, they remain oblivious to the peril until they meet a tragic end. Hyde was no different. Makoto, why should I have to do that? What did you just say? The story of the boiling frog teaches that one must react sensitively to gradual changes to lead an active life. However, that is a lesson only for those who possess the will to live. If there is a frog with the will to live that leaps out of the boiling water to find independence, wouldn't there also be a frog that has lost all desire, choosing instead to accept the warmth of the water and opt for the peace of nirvana? Whether it's drugs or alcohol, I chose this for myself. Naturally, I will take responsibility for the consequences. What are you talking about? The boiling frog is slowly destroyed by the heat, without even realizing it. Much like the countless stars consumed by the excessive interest of the media and the public. Makoto, I decide my own life. The 27 Club. In the West, this is the title given to the group of artists who died prematurely at the age of 27, poisoned by the weight of public attention. For the record, if you combine Hyde's age from his past life and his current life and divide them by 2, his current age is exactly 27. Chapter 125, Searching for the Roots. 1121 words. If we don't get signed by an agency before high school, isn't our life basically over? Somnium Music Academy, located in Kofu, Yamanashi Prefecture, just a stone's throw from Tokyo. A group of middle school girls, taking a break after their lessons, were huddled together discussing their uncertain futures. Did you see the new members of Sakurazaka 46? A friend of a friend of a friend of mine debuted there. I'm so jealous. They're all so cute. It's almost embarrassing to even compare myself to them. Will we ever be able to join an agency? The girls gathered here shared a singular dream, to become stars who, like the idols they admired, could bring smiles to their fans. Aramura Kasumi looked at the younger girls and shook her head. Even if bands are becoming mainstream, most agencies are still focused on manufactured idols when it comes to female entertainers. Honestly, if we had what it takes, wouldn't they have scouted us already? How can you say that here? As her friend scolded her, Kasumi twirled a strand of hair beside her face with her finger. But that's the reality. The kids destined to debut would have been picked up by agencies a long time ago. Isn't that why we're staking everything on our vocals? Main vocals don't have their looks scrutinized as strictly. More than anything, if you have even one exceptional talent, it's much easier to get picked for a group in a mid-sized agency. Well, that's true, but still, we have a chance thanks to Enfant Terribles. Since bands started trending, the most important trait agencies look for when putting together idol groups has shifted toward vocal capability. If we keep practicing our vocals like this, we'll definitely debut. The girl who kept reminding her peers and juniors of the harsh reality possessed a resolve that was surprisingly firm, contrasting with her thin and fragile appearance. Besides, I heard someone who stayed here for a while to learn vocals is now a superstar. We can become like that too. Who is it? I don't actually know that part. Aramura Kasumi scratched her head awkwardly at her friend's question. However, Kasumi's story was a legend passed down through the halls of Somnium Music Academy. It was a tale about someone who appeared out of nowhere like a gust of wind, looking haggard and worn out. They stayed for a short while to master their vocals, vanished as suddenly as they had arrived, and then emerged as the leader of an incredible band. To these girls, who hadn't even become agency trainees yet, the story sounded like a fairy tale. While underground idols existed, this was an era where any decent agency scouted and groomed talent starting from elementary or middle school. The prime example of that was the versatile entertainer AI from Strawberry Productions. To enter high school without being signed to an agency. In truth, it was already quite late. A leader of an incredible band. Doesn't that sound like Hyde? Aramura Kasumi turned her head at the absurd suggestion. Hyde was a global superstar whose name was known to everyone in the world. Even if life is hard enough to make you lose your mind, at least try to be realistic. But it was in the news that he ran away from his abusive uncle's house and wandered from place to place. Seeing how there are still lots of people staying at the director's house and the academy, isn't it plausible enough? Coming from Somnium Music Academy. Staying here. Then why isn't there anything posted about it? If he's that famous, the academy would have bragged about him being an alumnus. Considering the director picks up people from everywhere and lets them stay here, it's not impossible, and it's not like she lacks talent either. Aramura Kasumi brushed off her peers' words as idle daydreaming. One of the reasons Somnium Music Academy had survived this long was because of the director, who was an exceptional vocal coach. Given the nature of the academy, there were bound to be seniors who had successfully broken into the entertainment world. But Hyde, no matter how I think about it, it makes no sense. If Hyde had been from Somnium Music Academy, they would have been advertising it and making a massive fuss long ago. Wasn't this a time when independent music academies were shrinking as agencies expanded their own internal training departments? But hasn't the number of students been dropping too much lately? Aramura Kasumi worried about the declining fortunes of the academy. The teaching staff, which once numbered 5, was now down to 2, and even they were simply staying at the director's house, working for passion pay in their spare time. I've grown Southwest attached to this place. Aramura Kasumi felt a deep sense of regret regarding their current reality. Even if she debuted, she wanted the academy to remain. The memories of Somnium Music Academy, the place that had refined her as a musician, could vanish at any moment. Lately, Avril Lavigne is my favorite. Just as her peers and juniors changed the subject to talk about their role models SLAM. Suddenly, a younger student who had gone to the restroom burst back in, her face flushed bright red. Hyde is here. At those words, every single person in the practice room snapped their head around. Hyde is here. Stop lying. Why would someone who was recently rushed to the emergency room come here? He'd be resting at home. Are you on drugs or something? It was a natural reaction. Why would a superstar like that visit a place like this? Amidst the chaos, 3 facts flashed across Aramura Kasumi's mind. Hyde, who wandered various places after running away from home. The director, who takes in all sorts of runaway youths. The legend circulating through the academy. The moment those 3 facts clicked into place, the girls charged out into the hallway like wild beasts. And there they saw him. He's so damn handsome. A stunning young man, standing 185 centimeters tall with a muscular physique, was walking down the hallway of their academy. It felt surreal. Hyde stopped and looked at the girls peeking their heads out from the room. Is this Somnium Music Academy? It's really Hyde. As soon as Aramura Kasumi screamed, the other girls, who had been holding their breath beside her, began to shriek in unison. A magical occurrence. That was exactly what was happening right now at Somnium Music Academy. The website for reading paid chapters is available on my Patreon. The number of chapters on Patreon, 137 link, patreon.com/ultramagnus_t. Chapter 126, Searching for the Roots. 1152 words. Minors, order yourselves some orange juice. Adults, you can drink as much as you want. As I thrust a glass of beer topped with a thick layer of foam into the air, everyone in the barbecue restaurant raised their glasses and began to cheer. My memory was a bit fuzzy, but according to the faint traces of the past, Somnium Music Academy was a place to which I once owed a great debt. Because of that, I couldn't just walk away. I had intended to visit the mentor of this body and perhaps have a quick meal before leaving, but I couldn't ignore the way those kids were looking at me. It wasn't like it would cost much, so I simply brought everyone from the academy along to treat them to a meal. Sitting in front of the grill, I glared at the meat before me, preparing to become a specialist in the art of the barbecue. How should I put it, this place feels incredibly familiar. This is where I brought you when you first came to our academy. I still come here often when I meet friends who are like you were back then. Like I was back then. I'm talking about kids who can't even afford to eat properly, living only on their resentment toward the world. Watching him look at me with pride, a gentle smile on his face, I felt a wave of warmth reminded of the older brother who had taken me in during my previous life. Why hadn't I come back until now? After coming to this world, I had naturally assumed that outside of AI and enfant terribles, no one knew Hyde the human, as opposed to Hyde the star. That gentle smile provided a significant amount of comfort. This place is always the same. Whether it was when I was wandering in my youth looking for a dream, or when I first brought a friend who was lost on the streets here, nothing has changed. It's always exactly like this. Business must be good then. Is it because the meat is so tasty? In truth, from my perspective, this man was practically a stranger. Yet, seeing this elderly man with his shock of white hair smiling at me, as if looking at something he was proud of, made me feel as if a weight was being lifted off my shoulders. Why had I forgotten? Happiness isn't just about hedonistic pleasure. I had learned the hard way in my past life what kind of end awaits those who think life has no higher purpose than pleasure. Happiness often finds you in a small smile like this. As that thought finished, the glossy fat of the pork belly, cooked just right by the charcoal flames, began to make the meat glisten. Listen up, runts. I've grilled a lot of meat in my time, and the secret is you can't flip it too often. I began to flip the pieces of meat that were taking on a golden brown hue, spouting wisdom I'd acquired through years of experience. Once the meat was properly cooked, I snipped it with the scissors. The first piece of pork belly was dripping with juices. I handed it to the white-haired man, the man I presumed to be my mentor. It's meat grilled by a superstar. How is it? Does it taste a bit different? You've become quite the smarmy one, haven't you? People are meant to change, after all. I couldn't help but chuckle. According to the vague memories floating around, the old man used to sit in this very spot, asking about my situation while grilling meat for me, and I would do nothing but eat. But why was this never leaked? Usually, people would think about exploiting something like this. When a child someone has looked after becomes successful, it's common for people to sell that story for financial gain. Yet, the old man hadn't done that at all. It seemed he truly cared for me. You never told me your real name back then, and it seems that hasn't changed even after you became a singer. Did I really do that? You looked like someone who could leave at any moment. The old man spoke quietly of a time I didn't accurately remember, handing me a piece of meat from the grill. Is it okay if I call you Hyde? It's all right even if you don't visit me like this. Still, we could have been nothing more than a passing coincidence, yet you came back and remembered me. I'm truly grateful for that. Don't mention it. But I mean it when I say you don't have to visit. If the past feels like a shackle, it's okay to live on and forget it. Those who look forward are always more remarkable than those who live looking backward. A single sentence, stern yet warm. Those words, treating me not as a star but as a weak human, filled my chest with a warmth that was beyond comparison. I've always been a rebel. Tell me not to do something, and I'll do it even more. That part of you certainly hasn't changed. As I continued my conversation with the old man, the atmosphere in the restaurant gradually ripened. Laughter and rowdy chatter broke out from every corner. How long has it been since I felt an atmosphere like this? What the life of a star had stripped from me was precisely this kind of everyday scenery, the kind of scene that can only be created when people meet simply as human beings. In the middle of those thoughts, a young girl with stars in her eyes appeared before me, her gaze sparkling. Are you a student at Somnium Academy? My name is Aramura Kasumi. A girl in the middle of puberty coming to see me. High probability she was here as a fan. Want an autograph? If you have a camera, I can take a photo with you too. That's not it. She didn't want an autograph or a photo. There was a high chance she was an obsessive fan. How many groupies had approached me in America using autographs and photos as an excuse? Ha ha ha, I don't date younger girls, okay. I'm not really into younger types. That's not it either. Aramura Kasumi snapped back at Hyde's arrogant response. Then what is it? The moment I tilted my head in curiosity, a shocking story tumbled out of Aramura Kasumi's mouth. Actually, Somnium Music Academy is in a lot of trouble, so much so that they're considering closing it down. Can you tell me more? Hyde finally turned his body toward the girl and began to listen intently. The website for reading paid chapters is available on my Patreon. The number of chapters on Patreon, 137. Link, patreon.com/ultramagnus_T chapter 127, Searching for the Roots. Recommended reading while listening to Aerosmith's Dream On. In a way, it's more common than one might think. After returning to his dust-laden room, Hyde sat on the floor and picked up his guitar. Though people claimed the era of the band had arrived, the influence of the major agencies remained absolute. Free-spirited kids drifted into the indie scene without preparation, while those seeking the standard path debuted only after undergoing rigorous training within an agency. Looking at it coldly, if someone is still preparing at a music or dance academy by the time they hit high school, it means they lack a competitive edge. In such an industry, talent is sucked away by the indies or the agencies, leaving the academies caught in the middle to slowly rot. In a way, it was a natural progression dictated by the logic of competition and irreversible tide. Even enfant terribles could not change the current of the market. Changing the whole industry might be a tall order, but saving a single academy is nothing. If I played up the fact that I once stayed there, it would surely survive. It was an exploit of my fame as a star, but Somnium Music Academy was one of the few spaces that held the life I lived before becoming a star. It's not a difficult task. For promotion, I first needed music. A brilliant, kick-ass track that captured the story of that place. I began to grip the guitar strings, tracing back through my hazy memories. What is the motto of rock? It is freedom. Of course, the legitimacy of rock doesn't guarantee a living. In the name of mainstream appeal, many become like lions trapped in a cage, neither grand products nor magnificent beasts, but toothless predators that are neither one thing nor the other. Despite that, the motto of rock remains freedom. That is why I have refrained from making predictable songs until now. A predictable song, by definition, is something standardized. Standardized tracks basically repeat the same chord progressions, often called money chords, or offer only slight variations through the arrangement. Making those songs is boring for me, and boring for the listeners. I had never worked on such obvious music before. At their core, aren't players naturally attention seekers and rebels filled with a contrarian spirit? I want to be the only one, a peerless existence. Like Jimi Hendrix and the Beatles, I want to create something uniquely mine. Living day by day for that desire is the life of a player. Usually, once you put enough miles on your instrument, that's what happens. And yet, here I am, composing a predictable song. A rock ballad. In this world, it was a genre just beginning to emerge, but in the place I lived in my past life, it was a genre that had dominated the charts through self-replication until your ears bled. Of course, after the trend passed, the genre slowly died out through the 2010s, but it was still the very thing that had held back the sinking of the rock scene for a long time through sheer mainstream appeal. I should probably keep the main genre as hard rock, right? Because it's a genre that sold the soul of rock for popularity. One might think a rock ballad lacks pedigree, but surprisingly, they do have a foundation. That foundation is hard rock. Typically, a rock ballad starts quietly, builds an emotional line with mournful lyrics and intense high notes, and then concludes with a hard rock finish that explodes all the emotions built up beforehand. In the rock scene I belonged to in my past life, even the endings had the hard rock color drained out to finish like a standard ballad, but I couldn't bring myself to concede that far. Every time I look in the mirror, the wrinkles on my face grow thicker and deeper. The past is gone, like the time passing from twilight to dawn. Though it may be a rock ballad lacking pure roots, it has its own advantages. Specifically, the ability to focus entirely on emotional expression. The song I'm writing now is a tribute to my mentor. I construct the melody while envisioning a narrator who has grown old, reflecting on their own life as they fade with the years. Sing with me, sing for the years. Sing for the laughter, sing for the tears. On a rainy day, the old man found him. A boy standing alone in the rain. Is something wrong? It's a bit chilly to be out in the rain. Just mind your own business and keep walking. Watching the boy respond curtly to his question, the old man recalled his own youth, which was growing increasingly hazy. A being neither genius nor fool, caught in the middle, too clever to live doing nothing, but lacking the wisdom to navigate the world. Where does a young man who belongs nowhere go? Usually, out of frustration and despair, they either crave rest or project their anger toward the world onto others. Say, have you ever thought about singing? Life is too short to waste time like this. Tomorrow, God might just take you away, that's what life is. What does an old geezer like you know about me? Don't meddle. When the boy grabbed the old man by the collar, the man offered a bright smile. About half the lessons in my life came from both the wise and the foolish. Sing for the laughter, sing for the tears. That's the lesson I've earned from life. After getting it all out, you start dreaming again with a refreshed heart. Old man, I don't have a dream. A dream is something you can find at any time. Chapter 128, Searching for the Roots. Aramura Kasumi could not believe the sequence of events unfolding before her eyes. A global superstar was standing right in front of her, and that same superstar was pointing a camera at her. For her, what was happening now defied all common sense. You want us to sing? The girl spoke to the superstar with a trembling voice. The reason for her shock was the task at hand. She had to sing a song that would be uploaded to Enfant Terrible's Channel A platform that generated millions of views across the globe with every single upload. If I sing, it'll just look like an ad for a music academy, right? So obviously, the kids who actually study here have to be the ones to do it. The track they were about to record was a promotional song for Somnium Music Academy. If he made the advertisement all about himself, wouldn't that be a classic case of the tail wagging the dog? While Hyde was lost in these thoughts, a rough-looking man with blonde hair and black sunglasses approached the girl. Hey, it's just a simple commercial. No need to be so tense. Saito, don't you think the kid's going to get even more nervous if someone with a face like yours says that? Watching the scene unfold, Hyde wore a sly, mischievous smirk. I'd really appreciate it if this damn star would just shut his mouth for once. The rough-looking blonde man, who seemed extremely close with Hyde, flashed a smile that didn't quite match his aging features and gestured for Aramura Kasumi to take a deep breath. Listen, kid. Do you know what all the superstars I've seen have in common? It's that they perform better than anyone once the stage is set. This damn star here might have pushed this on you out of nowhere, but Ichigo Production always strives to keep its word. So don't worry too much. Thank you. Despite his intimidating appearance, Aramura Kasumi felt that Saito Ichigo might actually be a good person. Seeing him joke around and trade barbs with Hyde, the industry's most notorious troublemaker, was enough to confirm her suspicion. The only issue was the sheer lack of reality. It was a miracle sparked by a single sentence. Wait, is this actually real? She had simply been worried about the academy that had raised her as a vocalist. She had summoned her courage to speak to Hyde, who claimed he had only come to visit his old mentor. Honestly, she thought it would be a miracle if Hyde even mentioned the academy's name. But for Hyde, who operated on a global scale, every action was massive. Is this one of those opportunities that only comes a few times in a lifetime? Aramura Kasumi and the other students had essentially stumbled upon an unimaginable chance that others would kill for. They were going to be the main features in the academy's commercial. Can you all read sheet music? Setting aside the bewilderment of his mentor's students, Hyde began handing out the scores to everyone. All right, I'm going to do a demonstration now. Use this time to wrap your heads around the song. Hyde took the microphone in front of everyone. His mentor, the white-haired old man, grabbed an acoustic guitar and sat on a prepared stool. As the song began, a mournful melody accompanied by the resonant strumming of the acoustic guitar began to flow into Aramura Kasumi's ears. But what shocked her most was Hyde's vocals, raw, yet remarkably clear. She had heard enough news to have it practically etched into her brain that he had put down the guitar recently to focus on his singing, but this was the first time Kasumi had ever heard his voice without any other distractions. Was it because of the gentle acoustic backdrop compared to the usual electric distortion? As a fellow vocalist, his sheer volume and crystalline clarity sent shivers through her. It was a sound she had never experienced before. As the song reached its climax, his vocals sounded as if they were ready to punch through the studio walls and roar out into the world. It was a soaring, heavy high register that cleared the senses, contrasted against the calm ripples of the acoustic guitar. Honestly, the song was far too good to be wasted as a mere commercial jingle for an academy. However, regardless of the song's quality, there was one glaring problem. He wants us to sing this. Setting the quality aside, how on earth was she supposed to sing a song like this? When the two finished their performance, a thunderous round of applause broke out, but everyone's expressions were grim. The reason for their dark looks was surely the same as hers. They had to perform this monstrosity. Unaware or perhaps indifferent to their plight, Hyde walked toward the recording booth with a serene expression. He was going in to record the guide vocal. Watching Hyde's back, the students of Somnium Academy let out collective sighs. You know how much harder songs like this are, right? If we sing it, it's going to be a total disaster. Can't they just use the version he just sang for the ad? How could they possibly express such a monstrous song? They could hit the notes if they had to, but singing a song and expressing it were two entirely different realms. We just have to practice until we die, I guess. Thinking back to the performance by Hyde and their mentor, the students stared at their sheet music with trembling hands. The website for reading paid chapters is available on my Patreon. The number of chapters on Patreon, 137 link, patreon.com/ultramagnus_T. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novels Wonderland.